Hello, everyone. Welcome to the outreach session. We are here with our two wonderful speakers. We have Nicola Field and we have Sabrina Brando here with us. I'd introduce Nicola. So Nicola is co-founder of Global Animal Welfare International NGO, building capacity in wildlife rescue facilities and sanctuaries. She lectures in animal behavior and welfare. Nick is also co-chair of the IUCN Captive Bear Expert Team and is a trustee for Wild Futures, a UK primate welfare conservation charity, which is rescuing, campaigning, educating, and providing sanctuary to primates in need. Nick has 25 years of experience working with wildlife, particularly bears and primates. She is the former bear and bear team director at Animals Asia, China Bear Rescue Center, where she worked for 12 years. Nick also has worked for 8 years as a zookeeper with a range of species. She has done her master's in wildlife biology and conservation, as well as animal management and education and training qualifications. She has also spent time working in Uganda and Vietnam with the Bone and Sun Bear Conservation Center and also the Columbus Trust in Kenya. Thank you for being here with us, Nicola, and over to you for your presentation.
So hello everybody, thank you for this opportunity for presenting today at this wonderful conference, and what an amazing organisation it has been to get this off the ground. So congratulate everybody involved in getting this together. So my name is Nick Field and I co-founded Global Animal Welfare with my colleague Anne-Marie. So Global Animal Welfare is all about promoting animal welfare through capacity building and training, and also trying to increase the opportunity and potential for successful release, whilst at the same time ensuring optimum care for the animals remaining in captivity. So take a moment to reflect. How would you define a wildlife sanctuary or rescue centre? So it's actually very difficult to define, and in reality there are a range of facilities that are labelled or call themselves sanctuary or rescue centre. So GFAS, or the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, has a definition for sanctuary, and it's any facility providing temporary or permanent safe haven to animals in need, while meeting the principles of true sanctuaries. So providing excellent and humane care for their animals in a non-exploitive environment and having ethical policies in place regarding a range of things, including tours, commercial trade, exhibition, acquisition and disposition, and breeding and more. So the situation in Asia, and indeed in many parts of the world, is there are a lot of animals in need of help. So there are many different facilities that are described as sanctuary or rescue centre for wildlife. And often the wildlife found in these facilities, as I'm sure many of you have first-hand experience of, have traumatic pasts, having been displaced, caught up in wildlife trade, or indeed having the natural habitat being destroyed. So whilst many sanctuaries and rescue centres have the best intentions, they face immense challenges which can lead to animal welfare being compromised. Some of the reliance upon international volunteers for funding and expertise. This isn't always sustainable, and that's especially come into light in the past 12 months with the global pandemic. Some situations, animal welfare education and training isn't so readily available as it is in other parts of the world, not so accessible. And this can be for a variety of reasons, whether it's funding, whether it's language, just to name a few. So what's the solution? So ultimately, we need to move away from that reliance on international intervention. There are already several great models of organisations and sanctuaries in Asia that work from inside. And the bigger picture is that we need to build capacity within countries. Ultimately, the welfare of animals in them needs that consideration, wherever it may be. So engage and empower is the way global animal welfare approaches this. So structured training and capacity building with sanctuary staff. And by doing this, we're engaging and empowering the very people on the front line. And of course, in turn, that means improved animal welfare. And we're ensuring appropriate long-term care for animals destined for a life in captivity, whilst, as I mentioned before, maximising the opportunity for release. So how? It's important to recognise that every organisation and facility has specific needs to their situation, whether it's about funds and resources, whether it's species specific, country specific. There might be political factors to consider. But the important thing is about acknowledging and addressing those specific needs, so providing structured training with long-term development in mind. So we've worked in a variety of facilities and each has been unique. They've had specific needs and we've tailored bespoke training and support accordingly. So you can see here a list of a range of topics that we've addressed. And this isn't an exhaustive list, but these are some of the common concepts and topics that we've covered. Whether it's the theoretical, looking at animal welfare concepts down to very practical things, and also addressing things like health and safety and record keeping, for example. So they all have an important part to play, but it could well be that there are other topics that need to be addressed according to the individual facility. And importantly, we found creating a balance between theoretical concepts and training with practical. So again, the emphasis is on the needs of that particular rescue centre or sanctuary. So considerations are varied. So for example, has that facility got access to running water and electricity? What local resources are available, for example, for environmental enrichment programs? Are there specific cultural considerations? So practical and theory provides a constructive approach to applying what's learned during a workshop and putting it into practice, but in a realistic and constructive way. And another important aspect is in our approach is to involve and engage with all key stakeholders involved in operating a sanctuary. We can provide the tools and knowledge for caregivers to provide good animal welfare, but it does require the buy-in from management, for example, senior staff. There also needs to be understanding with veterinary staff. So ultimately, all parties need to work collaboratively in a holistic approach to how the sanctuary or the rescue centre is run. And this is key to success and, of course, again, the welfare of the animals. So with our workshops, we like to include all, fostering an understanding of how all these key components work, and other ways as well, including training senior staff, so perhaps those who are supervisors or team leaders, so they have the tools so they can organise, support, develop their own teams and have the confidence to do so, is really crucial. Problem solving plays a big part there. There's a few examples there that have been addressed in previous sessions or workshops. And these have been identified by specific sanctuaries or rescue centres, not by us. So it could be anything. There could be many more. And these are done through brainstorming sessions, talking through the issues, applying some of the concepts that have been learned, and really stopping to think about it, rather than things being reactionary responses as they're encountered in day-to-day operation. Really taking a moment to really consider the problem and how it might be addressed. So again, addressing specific needs and problems, but more importantly, identified by that facility. So beyond workshops, we like to find ways to support sanctuaries and rescue centres further. So just a couple of examples here. One was further to running a workshop, and it was based on developing an environmental enrichment programme with the sanctuary in question. And that was done by including and asking for ideas from the team themselves, who of course have the understanding and knowledge about what's available close to them, what's feasible within their facility, but at the same time getting them to create new ideas, and we were able to guide that in a more structured format, and it has been very successful. In other ways, facilitating expertise, whether that's through consultants or volunteers. In this particular example, in Indonesia, this Sumber Pedro, who had a long, complicated past, but was very nervous about being integrated with a group of Sunbears. And so our volunteer that we were able to support and fund, Alma, was able to work alongside the team, developing strategies to integrate Pedro with the other bears. And this has continued long after she's left, building his confidence and ultimately improving his welfare. So at the end of the day, the way we look at it is every animal matters. Ultimately, we believe all animals belong in the wild, but the reality is that that's not always possible. So where possible, we optimise the conditions and practice that can ensure successful release for suitable animals. But at the same time, we want to maximise the welfare of the animals remaining in captivity. We want to support the rescue and rehabilitation of all wildlife. And as we said at the beginning, there are so many animals in need for a variety of reasons. We believe in taking a compassionate approach to learning. And as I say, encouraging the engagement in animal welfare practice and empowering those on the front line. And of course, taking that holistic approach, so recognising all those who are involved. And of course, every situation is unique. So one size doesn't fit all. We have to consider each case individually. And whilst there may be many common denominators across many facilities, there will always be unique situations, and we can meet those needs and provide the tools to move forward. So basically, nothing is impossible, but we have to be realistic with what's happening. So the way we look at it is everything's possible, but nothing should be unexpected. And by working together with the sanctuary or the rescue centre and understanding things in the context that they're found in, we believe we can improve the welfare of those animals and see a more sustainable future for those facilities. So thank you so much for your time and giving us this opportunity. I really look forward to the Q&A and hearing more ideas from everybody else. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Nicola. That was a wonderful presentation, and we'd come back to you in a bit with the questions. For now, we'll go to Sabrina. So we have another speaker here, and Sabrina Brando is the director of AnimalConcepts, including the Practical Animal Welfare Science platform, and she is a PhD candidate at the University of Stirling in Scotland on the topic of human well-being and the human-animal interconnectedness. She teaches at various animal care and educational facilities worldwide on a variety of animal care and welfare and human well-being topics. She is a certified compassion fatigue professional and feels human well-being is key to pro-social work. Thank you for being here with us, Sabrina. Thank you for taking this time out, and over to you for your presentation.
Congratulations to Asia for Animals for putting on a marvelous conference, a virtual one this time, for a better tomorrow together. Absolutely delighted to be part of this breakout session, as education and engagement has always been very dear to my heart. Here, a lovely picture of engaging with children. One of them is my niece at a school as she was growing up, primary school. And of course, it's something that is really important, this aspect of education, engagement, kindness and respect and understanding to change hearts and minds to act for animals and for the planet. And of course, it's important to always be a student too. And for me, the first Asia for Animals conference was 3 years ago in Kathmandu, and I really enjoyed learning so many new things and connecting with people there. So thanks very much for inviting me for this breakout session together with friend and colleague Nicola Field, and of course our moderator Sarita Joshi, on a topic also dear to my heart, which is about global collaboration for optimal animal and human well-being. Very briefly, who am I? I'm Sabrina Brando. I've had 15 years of working in zoos and aquariums myself, from a junior caregiver to zoological director. And then I started my own company, AnimalConcepts, and we launched the Practical Animal Welfare Science platform. I have a bachelor in psychology and a master's in animal studies, and I was the first director of animal welfare of the World Associations of Zoos and Aquariums from 2017 to 2019. And I truly hope that when finances allow again, that they will reinstate this position, as it's fundamental to all the other work that we're doing in conservation as well. I'm currently a PhD candidate at the University of Stirling, studying human well-being and the human-animal interconnectedness. Because of course, we have to care for the people who care for animals, or care for species conservation and the planet, as much as we want to care for the well-being of the animals. AnimalConcepts was founded in 2004, and we have been facilitating educational efforts since then, and also in Asia since 2009, all kinds of activities that had to do with animal welfare and care. And of course, we are focusing, as I mentioned, also on this interconnectedness on, the human well-being side. So really taking care to give care, and the one care approach. And in 2020, in the midst of COVID, we launched the Practical Animal Welfare Science platform, which brings together all kinds of researchers, practitioners, animal care staff, veterinarians, students, and many more who are all involved and working for animal care and animal welfare. And this has both a human well-being platform, an animal welfare platform, and of course the Earth Charter, which we use as an ethical lens and compass, as AnimalConcepts is an Earth Charter international partner, and of course integrations of the Sustainable Development Goals. So all this together really looking at well-being for everybody, the greater community of life and the planet. And of course, when we're thinking about animal welfare, about human well-being, it's really important to think about the individuals, because animal welfare, of course, pertains to the individual, but also look at the organization. So looking at what are the symptoms, what are the things that we need to address right now to make the life of animals better. And one of the ways that we can do that is to systematically, of course, look to how should our programs be developed, what skills and training is needed. And one of the guides that you could use there is the Caring for Wildlife from the WASA, the welfare strategy, and really looking at what are necessary with regards to systemic changes. So what are the systems that are causing some of the symptoms that we are working with and trying to alleviate? And of course, when we're thinking about animal welfare, we are really looking at the 24/7 perspective. So even when we go home, the animals in the zoos and aquariums and sanctuaries and wildlife centers, they are there the whole time. So how do we facilitate 24/7 across lifespan? And that's really, where, of course, together with all the different approaches to animal welfare and frameworks, we really try and think about all the various topics like enrichment and training and the human-animal interaction and nutrition. All those things come together in these types of programs and also these types of events that we have done all over the world together with a lot of different organizations. You can, of course, also find information on our website. You can download some of these workshops that can help you bring awareness to what is needed in animal welfare. So it's not an animal welfare assessment tool, but it is a tool to bring awareness to how are the animals living in nature, for example, and how are we caring for them here, and might there be differences which could be a welfare concern or not. So those are some of the things that we are looking up and really looking at how can we make, like the platform says, practical animal welfare science. How can we take the science and make it applicable as we care for animals? And we want to think about their lifespan, but we of course want to also really look at what does their day look like. And the black, of course, are all the hours that we are not at the facility, not at the sanctuary, not at the wildlife center, not at the zoo and the aquarium. So what can we do to, enrich the animals' lives, and not just by giving them enrichment, but how do we enrich their lives and making sure that they have options, that they have complexity, choice and control, so they can really, be the actors of their own lives. Because even when we are at the facility, we have a lot of different things to do. So how can we look at the environment of the animals and make it as semi-autonomous as possible? And for that, we also use a concept called habitat management that we have taken from ecology to really look at what are the characteristics and aspects that are necessary for a species to thrive. And then, of course, we need to adapt those programs to suit the individual animals in our care with their own needs and wants and personalities. And of course, many facilities have all kinds of different goals: education, conservation, research, engagement. And I always say welfare, animal welfare, is an end in itself, and it's a goal in itself. So as much as it is fundamental for the success for all the other programs, we have to really look at the well-being of the animal as the animal is experiencing it. The animal doesn't really care about our lofty goals of conservation of a species. They really care about what matters, what happens to them, what matters to them. And therefore, animal welfare is a goal and an end in itself. And that is something that we need to acknowledge. And therefore, we also have to look at how some of the other goals that we have, such as conservation or educational programs or engagement, could, positively or negatively affect the well-being of the animals. And it's really a delight for us to work together with all kinds of organizations, including here the photo in Thailand with Wild Welfare, who of course has also been working in Asia and other parts of the world for a very long time, and collaborating with all these different zoos and organizations and individuals who are dedicated to making changes for animals, like here in Thailand. And of course, also with zoo associations, doing workshops, doing the practical work, because there's a lot of talking we can do about animal welfare, but we also really need to look at, okay, so how can we make a difference for animals in practice? And as much as animal welfare is about the individual animal welfare is also very much about the people, because it's through the people, through the care staff, the veterinarians, the policymakers, the lawyers, the botanists, the pathologists, all these people together that it is necessary for us to chat and talk, bring kindness and respect, and so we can work together. And whether that is in Thailand or whether that is with the Japanese Zoo Association, whether it's looking at the strategic perspective of how can we make, use of all these expertise and develop resources and information that can be filtered down into the facilities and the members of zoo associations, or working directly with facilities to make changes. All these things are necessary, both from, a strategic to a very practical day-to-day operation. And I'm delighted to also have worked with Animals Asia, visiting Bear Sanctuary in Chengdu. Again, there, lots of expertise. And this is where, the ever student comes through again. So much that I learned there from being there, and such wonderful work. And again, learning from each other to making changes for animals there as well. And of course, the continuation of collaborations also continue with the Chinese associations of zoological gardens, together with Animals Asia and AnimalConcepts. We really enjoy collaborating with them in their efforts of improving and promoting optimal animal welfare with the PAWS platform in Mandarin, and lots of interaction there. Because in the end, it's really about that. It's really discussing together, looking at the practical and the specifics from a particular individual, organization, and facility, and the individual animals. How can we make changes together? And looking both at the sources of animal welfare concerns and problems. So it's wonderful to train penguins to stand in foot baths so that we can treat their bumblefoot. But where does this problem arise from? Are they not swimming enough? Are they walking on surfaces that are not good for their feet? So how can we prevent these problems from happening? And the same, of course, with perhaps oral stereotypies that we could see in certain animals. So how do we look at the source? And again, looking at the symptoms of animal welfare versus the systems. What sort of processes need to be in place to care for the animals? What changes can we make? And of course, there's many changes that we can make. Here are just some of the ones, whether it's providing different substrates, different presentations of food, and how animals forage. So there's a lot of things that we can do, and not just in the enclosures of the animals, but also, remember, I talked about all the hours, the black time that we are not at the facility. We might bring the animals back into their den, in their sleeping quarters. But a lot of animals are not necessarily sleeping there, even though we are going home. So how do we also, really look, again, 24/7 around the clock at what opportunities, complexities, choices, and control animals have. And it's individual care staff, veterinarians, and others that day to day can make a difference. And just like you're seeing here in this photo, so that animals do not have to, be in these facilities, in these bed areas, like you can see in this one, where there's absolutely nothing to do, nothing to see. And so, those are really the unacceptable practices that we have to change over time. And as I said, it's all about us working together, and individuals can make a difference. And of course, Dr. Jane Goodall, what you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. And I think all of us working for animals, that's what we're dedicated to, and outreach and education can make such a difference. Sometimes it's not, I think most of the time in my experience, it's not because people, didn't want to, or they just didn't know better. Just like I sometimes don't know better, and, you do what you can. And then when you know better, you do better. That's another famous quote that I didn't put here. But as individuals, we can always make a difference. And so that we can continue to ask, are we the best that we can be with the information that we have from, working with wildlife scientists to understand what are they learning from animals in the wild that we can, use for making captive care even better, right? Because our quality of work is their quality of life. And it's this constant autocritical view of looking at are we doing the things that we're doing. And therefore, we're coming full circle with may the student in you never die. So we always have to keep learning. So please feel free to reach out to us on our website if you have any questions, if you need any help with regards to animal care and welfare, or human well-being and human well-being and welfare, of course. And there are resources you can download from, the workshop that I briefly mentioned earlier. You can also download a pre-transfer checklist and the 24/7 concept together so that you can have some sort of framework and tools to look through it together. And we really feel it's very important to make it inclusive, make it equal, so that it's equity, that we have an opportunity all to learn. So whether or not you have financial means, really reach out to us. We have the Acts of Kindness program so that anybody can access any information, really looking at how people learn and different languages and so on. So please reach out to us. So have you enriched a life today? I hope you have, and I hope you continue all the work, because it's only together with all these people from all these different expertise that we are going to make a difference together for a better tomorrow. So thank you so much, and very much looking forward to answering any questions that there may be.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, Nicola. Those were two wonderful presentations and such an inspiring work that you both do. We have some questions here with us during your presentations. We did receive them, and one of them, the first one that that has often come to many people during the pandemic, is that what are the kind of challenges that you face during this work right now in these extraordinary times? So maybe Nicola, can you answer that first, and then we'll go to Sabrina.
Well, I guess the most obvious challenge is that we can't go anywhere. But I think a conference like this, for example, just proves just how far you can reach virtually. And I think the whole world has had a steep learning curve virtually. And I think also thinking about how you can work together along the lines of what Sabrina was just saying in the end of her presentation, working together collaboratively with other organisations. If you know others who are working in, say, a particular region that you want to reach, working together, providing opportunities virtually. There's many ways of working, but yeah, the biggest challenge is not being able to physically go anywhere, but that's it. It doesn't stop us continuing with our work as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Sabrina, what do you think about that? Is elaborating more on, you said, like Nicola did say that, virtual is one way to do communication and to reach out to people in terms of needs, but how there is both of your presentations did mention that there are very unique set of needs and challenges for each of the facilities. Mm-hmm. How difficult it is to address these things in these times? And what are some ways to mitigate that?
Yes, thank you for that question. So like Nicola said, we're not going to be stopped by, doing this work. So a way, of course, is the virtual way in in general education. But then, of course, what we tend to do is also we work with individual organizations and facilities. And, what we would do usually on site, we try and do as much as possible off site. So we go through similar checklists, and we have protocols of getting all the information that is needed on a certain animal. We get videos from people, we get photos, we get records, and based on those, we continue to work again in the virtual sphere. But we work together with that information so that we try, next to general education, to do also tailor-made, like Nicola was saying, really working. Every facility is unique, so we can also in the virtual sphere work one-to-one with facilities, and not only, for example, in general education to a group. Yeah.
Thank you for answering that question. The other question is, so like you said, what one shoe doesn't fit all is what Nicola's presentation specifically said. And the question is also one of my personal questions, that what are these crucial needs to remember, these things to remember while you modify or create a whole different program for any facility? Of course, it is defined by their particular needs, but does it happen ever that you reach there and you realize there is way more that they need help with that they've asked for, and how do you address something like that?
That's a really good question. And yes, quite possibly there could be additional things that could need addressing. I think the important thing is, obviously at the centre of all this is the welfare of the animals, but the people involved in their care are equally as important. So hearing what their needs are and sensitively addressing their needs, and being able to support them and give them the tools and the frameworks that they need. And as I also said during my presentation, the important thing is to engage with everybody, all the stakeholders. So, whether it's managers or if a facility is part of a larger organisation, whether it's more of a senior management, it might be other stakeholders, there might be people, the donors, for example, as well, that are involved in the work. So it's working sensitively, I think, is the key thing with the organisation in the context that we find ourselves. So and that can also be cultural as well.
So Sabrina, you want to present your views on that question as well, or I have a different question for you here, which does come from something that you said, that welfare is an end in itself. It's an end goal in itself, and which, it's quite refreshing and revolutionary at the same time, because a lot of people who understand and work in animal rights and conservation do not really see welfare as an end goal. So can you elaborate more on how and why you say that welfare in itself is an end goal? You did say that, the needs of animals is their, specific needs, but can you elaborate more on this for understanding?
Yes, absolutely. So Nicola talked about stakeholders, and obviously the obvious stakeholder when it comes to animals is themselves. So they are a stakeholder. So when we talk about what we are doing and who we are asking and who is at the table, then of course, when we design animal welfare programs, we really look at obviously what does a species need, biological needs, how they have evolved, where do they live. But we also look very much at who are they? What is their personality? What is their individual? So that we tailor the programs to them. The important part there is that we might have all kinds of ideas about what sorts of roles these animals have. So if I'm talking, of course, sorts of roles in zoos and aquariums will be different than perhaps a role or maybe a non-role, the non-attribution of a role in a sanctuary, for example, is that you can just be, and we don't necessarily ask anything from you, to sanctuaries where animals are being asked to maybe participate in certain programs, because that is also how caring for animals is very expensive. So of course, it needs to be paid in one way or another. So we need to kind of look at what sorts of roles do animals have. And so in zoos and aquariums, animals might have roles such as you are an ambassador animal. You go out in public presentation and, with positive reinforcement training and so on. We send messages about how to, protect animals in the wild. They have a role that might be a breeder animal, and they breed for the food for other animals. It might be an animal in a role that is about being on display. So we give animals all kinds of roles. Animals might be part of breeding programs to help, the decline of a species, and therefore also being able, with what some zoos and aquariums are doing, is reintroducing animals and as part of a breeding program. And all these are really important roles, but ultimately the question needs to be, so what does this animal think of all that? So like I mentioned, animals don't necessarily, they're not aware of, we're trying to save, the pangolin, we're trying to save a certain species. What happens to them matters to them. And therefore, our goals such as conservation, education, research, outreach, whatever, things we are doing can all have an effect on the well-being of the animal, positive or negative, neutral. But ultimately, I always try to say to people, let's not forget that welfare is an end in itself, and because it matters to that individual animal. And therefore, I think it's important. So just recently, I was talking to university students working in marine mammal conservation. We talked about how more and more studies and programs are looking at the well-being of wild animals, also including how we study wild animals to preserve their habitat and so on. And this is why you have to go through often lots of ethical approval processes. And again, there, looking at who are those individual animals in the wild, that we come from a good intention. We want to protect them, we want to save the species. But what does it mean, the things that we do, and how can it affect animal welfare? And of course, the same when we talk about animal rights with regards to, what we should and shouldn't do with animals. But there, the question is, you can have all kinds of rights. Of course, animals in captivity, and when we care for animals in human care, they also, so there the rights are of course different, but the right then would be to a good life. And so then it's an important discussion again to say, okay, so how much, in what way do you have good welfare if you are living out free and wild, as sometimes is very short said. But again, there, you could be living free and wild, but still have very poor welfare. And so constantly looking at that interaction and really critically looking at, okay, so obviously welfare is like rights, and others are all human constructs that because we try to understand and give words and frameworks to how we want to show up for animals, what we ought to be doing for animals, what our responsibilities are. But at the center, it's if we then take the other aspects away, then how does that matter to that individual animal? So regardless of in what sphere we are, I think that's a very important thing to keep sight of.
Yes, absolutely. That does really, really make a sounding reason for seeing welfare as an end goal for that very animal that is in need. Yeah.
Yes, and I think it's important that, for example, zoos and aquariums, I mentioned in my presentation, the Camp for Wildlife strategy that WASA has. And in that strategy, there is clear sections on how, conservation goals might, bite, if you like, the welfare goals. They're not necessarily in line with each other. And their conservation strategy also talks about this. And we see more and more meetings where the conservationists and the welfare people come together and talk about, okay, seeing that we have these various goals, how can we mitigate the problems that might be there? So it's important to note that many people in different spheres are looking at this and paying attention to it. Not necessarily to the extent that I think would be desirable, but I think it's great to see that that is changing.
Yes. Okay. So, we have more questions, and one of them is, so what is the success rate? So we do understand that these facilities, rescue centers and sanctuaries also want to introduce the animal back to the wild. Basically, with the rescue centers, it is the goal is to have the animal go to its natural habitat. But what is the success rate of this? How many times is it possible, or does this happen?
It's a good question, and I'm not sure that there's actual data that will give you, actual figures. And I think there's two sides to that. I think that can be the goal of many rescue centres and sanctuaries, but also for many rescue centres and sanctuaries, the aim is to provide the animals that have come into their care with a lifetime of care away from wherever they've come from. I think probably an important distinction to make is that often there are some sanctuaries and rescue centres, and like I said, there's many that are wonderful models, but are often regarded as the place to move animals from a bad situation, but sometimes they're not always the best solution for those animals. And we shouldn't hide behind that label of rescue centre or sanctuary and think that's it, we're done, we've solved the problem, we've saved them and they're okay. In terms of the opportunity for release, that would be a wonderful goal, but there are so many variables to take into consideration. So what has that animal's experience been? Are they even suitable? Is there a suitable place for them to be released? So there's a very fine line. They can't just be released and everything is solved there either. It's a very complex situation, and there's a big picture to consider, not just about the individual animals, but the species as well. And also what the threats are to them if they are to be released. Are we going to release them into a situation where actually they're only going to end up being killed or caught up in trade again? So there are many variables to take on board. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, it does. I think it is very much in line with what Sabrina also said, that she said that, in conservation, when you release an animal into the wild, not necessarily their welfare is happening, it's good for them. So it does make sound sense. And, we're at the closing for our session, but yes, please add.
Yes, so I do, obviously, I think if animals, like Nicola said, if animals are well and there's a good space for them to be released, they're not going to encounter problems that make them maybe come into the rescue centres in the first place, then I'm absolutely, I do want to stress that I'm absolutely 100% for releasing animals into the wild, and it can certainly contribute to their well-being. I just wanted to really make sure that we look at individual animal welfare also when they are in the wild, just like when we do in human captivity. But if there's an opportunity to release animals back, that's only wonderful. So yeah.
Thank you. Yes, totally noted that. We do have one more question. We have some 7 minutes left, but this question has come in and says, how do you ensure sustainability with regards to the skills or training delivered at Grassroots?
Another really good question. Well, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, one of the things I think this past year has highlighted is that you can't always rely. So there are many, and I'm thinking sanctuaries and rescue centres at the moment. There are many in the world, not just in Asia, that rely on international volunteers, both for expertise and funds. And that's obviously not sustainable. I mean, I think there's been flaws in that for a long time, but this, I think, has really been highlighted this year. And at the end of the day, it's about equipping the people, as I called it, on the front line, the people who are there in situ, who can care for the animals and understand what's required for them. So meeting their needs as individuals, as species, in the context, the given context that they find themselves in, and they're going to be the people who recognise what's feasible in that context and in their own environment. So sometimes it's just about providing people with the opportunity and the access to the knowledge and the training that perhaps that is just not so readily available in some other countries, and so that they can move that forward and make it a more sustainable operation.
Okay. Sabrina, you want to add to that? Yes.
Yes, and I really like bouncing back and forth here with Nicola on this, because obviously, I mean, we have worked together and we look at things very similarly. And, you know, like she mentions also the importance of looking at, okay, so what is necessary now? And some of the things I'm very interested in is, and what is necessary in the long run also. Of course, we're all interested in this, is to see, so for example, if we look at the professions worldwide that are related to caring for animals, the only one that is really regulated is the veterinary profession. So, you know, and I think, you know, if we're looking at symptoms, the symptoms of why maybe it's hard to care for animals, or the knowledge is not available, or not in the right languages and so on, or the legislation is missing, it also has to do very much into, okay, we want to care for animals now, we want to make a difference now. And parallel to that, we have to look at, okay, so there's very many countries, including here, I mean, I'm based in Europe, there's many countries in Europe that don't have schools, education on how to become an animal caretaker. Some countries have, some have. But then also you don't necessarily need that education if, you know, there's facilities hiring people, you know, without education, because maybe it's cheaper. Or so if we're talking about how do we also make changes long term, we need people working for animals now and making changes, and we also need people who are looking at, okay, so how can we make this a much more regulated profession field, so that, you know, just like if you want to be a teacher or a lawyer or a nurse, you need to have certain you know, information, credentials, papers, and I think it's wonderful to see that we're moving to maybe, and this is why it's important also to take a global perspective, because this is not just problems in Asia or problems in, you know, we have these same problems everywhere, and often they're because at the root things are not necessarily in place. And so, you know, the important part there is to, okay, so how do we make sure that if you are going into this profession, you have the right education? And of course, that will be different if you're caring for wild animals in captivity, or maybe you're caring for sanctuary farm animals, or, you know, but it's really kind of looking and how also if you're going in as a junior and then you become a senior keeper, then you maybe become a curator or zoological director, you need skills in all these levels, right? And so this is why continuous personal development is so important. And having the right education. So I think, you know, these things, the grassroots is really important to building up now, because welfare of people and animals is all about the now. And at the same time, we need to really look at changes in systems and a more regulated field, just like veterinarians and others needing to stay up to date. And that will be very helpful to also, I think, in the long term, get rid of some of these symptoms that we're dealing with, because you haven't maybe learned how to do behavior observations that then can help you interpret animal behavior and so on. So I think all these things are complementary and important.
I think Sabrina uses a brilliant word, the symptoms of the situation or the problem, and how to rectify those symptoms. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for these wonderful views of yours, and also the ideas, suggestions for how we should look, the direction that the need of sustainability in animal welfare, and how you've really brought, towards the end of the session, I think we've come to a very global perspective of how we need systems in place and what can be done towards that is something to look at it collectively, not just as Asia for animals, but collectively as a world together. So thank you for this wonderful session and your amazing presentations and your work. It's really, really amazing to be part of what you do, to learn about what you do, and to learn from you. Thank you.